Hi there, I'm Carolyn Rose, and I'm the president of ISLS, and I have here with me today Cindy Melo-Silver and Sadhna Puntambecker, and we are hosting this informational webinar to inform our membership about an upcoming bylaws vote. This is the third in a series of 3 webinars that we're hosting today, and there will be additional information sessions coming up in the spring semester. But we wanted to kick off this discussion now so that there's plenty of time for people to air their questions and concerns, and we're hoping that this will raise awareness and that we'll have a lot of interaction with society members over the next several months as we prepare for the vote. So before we start today's discussion, I'd just like to go over some slides that that will give a little bit more information about what it is that we're trying to accomplish here. So let me just switch on screen sharing for now. Okay, so we are the International Society of the Learning Sciences. For those of you who may be watching this broadcast who are not part of the society, you can find out more about what our society stands for and offers as resources to our members by going to this URL that you see on the slide in front of you. In short, the International Society of the Learning Sciences is a professional society dedicated to the interdisciplinary empirical investigation of learning as it exists in real-world settings and to how learning may be facilitated both with and without technology. I want to take this opportunity to give this caveat, especially to note that what you will hear today in this webinar is mainly the representation of the members who are part of this webinar speaking on their own behalf and shouldn't be taken as an official statement of the society itself. Apart from what we will look at that is the current and proposed bylaws texts, the remainder of all of the discussion that you see is really just the 3 of us representing our particular perspectives. The purpose of this information session is to inform the ISLS membership about the details of this upcoming vote. We want to make sure that we get as much participation as possible in this vote, and we want to make sure that people are fully informed of the issues, but also that the community is aware of the variety of perspectives that are out there in the society regarding the vote before it comes to its official time for each member to cast their vote, which will happen at the conference coming up this summer. So these webinars are the opportunity of the community members to voice their questions and concerns. And so far, in these webinars, the 2 that we've had so far today, we have not gotten questions from the viewers, but this Google Hangout on the Air is set up so that it's possible for you to submit questions and we can discuss them during the session. So for anybody out there who may be watching this this webinar as it's being hosted live, please feel free to use the chat facility to submit questions and comments so that you can be part of the discussion with us. So let me just give a very little bit of background on this bylaws change to kick off the discussion. So it all really starts with the fact that we're an international and interdisciplinary society, and this diversity in our membership is really an important part of our identity and one that we really want to emphasize and preserve and leverage in all of the work that the society does. So from the top, it's important to us to reflect that balance on our board of directors. But the current distribution of regional representation and also disciplinary representation within the society is not equal, and because of that, it makes it difficult to achieve a balance on our board that would allow for all of these voices and perspectives and backgrounds to weigh in on the decisions and work that we do in the balanced way that we would like to see it doing so. So here's a little bit of logistical information to keep in mind. First of all, it would be valuable for anybody participating in this vote to be fully informed about what our current bylaws are. And you'll see on the slide in front of you a URL that will take you right to the current society governments and organization documents, which are on our website. You can also read about the proposed bylaws change and its history at the link that's given. And links to the 2 earlier webinars are also listed on the slide in front of you. The bylaws vote will take place online during the 26th International Conference of the Learning Sciences, which will be held in Singapore this summer. And all of the information about that conference, including the schedule and information like which workshops and papers and symposia will be offered, will be increasingly available from the conference website, and you see the link there. So keep your eye on that website and you'll see when exactly the vote is scheduled. But it's going to be an online vote, so even members who are not present at the conference will be able to participate in the vote. But we're doing it at the conference so that we can get the most attention of the largest portion of our membership to participate in this important decision that the society needs to make. And I'd like to emphasize, as I have in the earlier webinars, that the decision really rests with the membership, that this isn't something that the leadership is trying to push through, but we want to really raise this issue and awareness to this issue among our membership to get an active discussion going between now and when the vote takes place 6 months from now, so that the society membership is in a good position to make the decision that reflects the view of the society. And we are really here as facilitators to get the discussion going and just raising awareness and giving an opportunity for everyone to have their voice heard. So in that spirit, I have also included in this slide a link to a Google Doc. And if you're seeing this webinar after it takes place live, you're still very welcome to go to this Google Doc and enter your questions and concerns, and we will be monitoring that Google Doc between now and the vote, and we will follow up with you if you give us indication how we may do so. And in addition to that, you are also welcome at any time to email me as ISLS President this year at the email that you see represented there on the slide. If you go to the link about the history of the bylaws change and details about the bylaws change, you will see this information that's in front of you on the slide here that talks about the efforts of the leadership of the society over the past several years to try to maintain the kind of representation across regions and across disciplines that we have talked about valuing. And it will also describe how we haven't felt that we have achieved the success that we wanted to in making this happen. And that's why we come to you with the issue of this potential bylaws vote now. So here on this slide, you will see what about the bylaws specifically we're proposing to change. It's all from Article 4, which is pertaining to election of members of the board of directors, and in particular sections 2 and 3 are the ones that we are proposing to modify. And the biggest change is in sections 2 and 3, where currently the practice is that when it's time to add 4 new members to our board of directors, we have a nominating committee that's made up of past presidents and other very senior members of our society, that they put together a slate of members of the society who have been very active in service already and who have demonstrated that they have the kind of profile that we're proud of as a society, and that we believe that they have something of value to contribute to the society in the position of being on the board. Then the board has the opportunity to add some additional members to that slate, and then finally a vote takes place. We still intend to keep that practice, but what we're adding to it is the ability of the nominating committee on a particular round of elections to designate up to 3 seats out of the 4 as special purpose seats as the need arises. So, for example, that might be that a particular seat would be designated as a seat that's set aside for a particular region or for a particular discipline, so that as the slate contains some number of candidates that have the requisite characteristics that are associated with that seat, as we have collected the votes, then the top ranking candidate with the characteristic that's associated with the seat would then get that seat. So it's still by votes. It's still the same criteria and high bar for being placed on the slate in the first place. But it just gives a little bit more of a tool in the hands of the nominating committee to address issues of representation on the board, so that there's more of a guarantee that we'll be able to maintain the balance that that we feel is beneficial for the society. The only other change besides these designated seats, and I want to point out, it doesn't require that on any particular year all 3 of those seats are used, and they don't all have to be used for the same purpose on each round, but up to 3 can be designated as special purpose seats on a particular round. In addition to the special purpose seats, we also are just adding a provision for making a decision about president in the case of a tie, because there hasn't been a policy for exactly the procedure for dealing with that particular case if it should arise. And so we just feel, as a board, more comfortable with the idea that that should be made explicit, and so that is also part of the change that we're proposing at this time. So those are the 2 changes exactly to the bylaws that we're proposing, and this session is about clarification and discussion about the issues surrounding that. So I want to thank you very much for coming. Now I'm going to take this off of the screen sharing mode so that we can come back to Cindy and Sadhana and to start the discussion portion of this webinar. So with that, I'd like to pass the mic over to Cindy, who will first introduce herself and share a little bit about her perspective, and then we'll move on to Sadhana. So Cindy, sorry, it's late here in the East Coast.
Good evening, everybody, for those of you on the East Coast, and good morning for those of you who are elsewhere. I'm Cindy Mello Silver. I'm immediate past president, having served on the ISLS board for the last 8 years up until July. And this issue has come up, I guess, over the last few board elections as trying to make sure that we've had representation from Asia and from Europe has often become an issue, in that we have members tending to vote for the people they know, as we would naturally expect, and there's a larger proportion of members from North America. But I think that the society has had a strong commitment to being an international organization and trying to increase the proportion of membership elsewhere. So we've got a little bit of a chicken and an egg problem, and we are trying to create a mechanism to be able to deal with that issue, to try and continue to ensure strong international representation in the society. And we've also had a concern about making sure that we've had the disciplinary diversity, which I think has not come up as much of an issue, but I think Carolyn has brought that to the fore as a computer scientist, and perhaps one of few computer scientists who's been president. Carolyn, is that right? So
yeah, True. And there have been very few computer scientists on the board. And based on our surveys, a very small, maybe like 10% of the society is computer scientists. But an even smaller number of our society members are designers. I think it's down to 2 or 3%. And yet, in our field, we really value participation across these disciplinary lines in the research that we do. And so we want to make sure that these perspectives are represented, that there are bridges to other related societies, and that there's a place in the society for people with all of these resources to contribute towards the work that we do, both in our research but also in the other activities that we do as a society, such as our workshops for mentoring, for example, to try to bring up the next generation of researchers in the field. So I'll turn it back to you, Cindy.
And I'll turn it over to Sadhana.
Hi everyone, I'm Sadhana Puntambekar and I'm the Executive Officer of ISLS, and I've been since 2010. So I'm the person who actually runs the board elections, and I think one question, I fully support the bylaws change, but one question that I would like us to discuss is, given that the majority of our membership is from North America and then, followed by Europe and Asia, I see that we've had people from Europe as well as Asia represented on the board. So is this something that, happens naturally? Do we need to have mechanisms in place to actually have members from those areas represented on the board, or can we just let this flow in the sense that people get elected from other regions also? So I just wanted to throw that out there for discussion. Do we really need to go from board members to elect board members from those areas? Or do we need to make sure that we have enough members in the first place from countries that are not represented very well on the board, and then use more of a bottom-up approach where if we have more membership from those areas, then we might have more board members as well. So I'd just like us to discuss that issue, I guess.
Thank you for raising that issue, Sadhana. Actually, that resonates very clearly with some perspectives that Nancy Law was raising in the first webinar this morning. I'd like to let Cindy be the first person to respond to that.
So I think in a perfect world, that's what would happen. But I think in places where there are not already an active learning sciences community, I think it's up to us to do more reaching out. Although we have been successful in doing some rotation, for example, although this year we elected 2 members from Asia, we had no members from Asia and have not had a president from that part of the world since Naomi, I think. Naomi Miyake.
Cindy, I can't hear you. Sadhana, can you hear Cindy?
No, I can't.
So we seem to have lost Cindy. While we're waiting for Cindy to come back online, I'd like to point out that yes, it's true. We have had less representation from Asia than we would like on our board. I'd like to point out that our board members from Asia that we have had are very notable and strong, like Nancy Law and Naomi Miyake, both of whom have been extremely strong pillars of the community. And one thing that I learned from listening to both of them talk about their goals in their leadership in the society is that there are many learning sciences related societies and efforts that are local to the Asian region, that there are active researchers in learning sciences that are part of those societies but just haven't been part of
a few
our
years
society.
ago, like 2007.
Cindy, we lost you for a while. Oh, now she's completely dropped out.
Yeah.
Let me send her an email and let her know to come in. Oh, there she is.
I'm back.
Yeah, Cindy, we missed about 2 minutes of what you were saying. Let me just finish up one comment that I was making,
Okay.
and then we'd like you to sort of restart the last few minutes of what you were saying because we couldn't hear you. That something in the connection wasn't right. But I just want to say that in becoming aware of the fact that in Asia that actually there is a lot of local organization of learning sciences, that there are societies in Asia for learning sciences and researchers who are very active in those societies. And we are not aware enough of the research that they're doing. Now, it's difficult for them to just bridge directly into our community. I've seen struggles, and even in my position on the editorial board for IJCSCL, I see this also, that the style of their research is a bit different from ours, and in not having been actively part of our society, they may sound like they're not so aware of the research that we're doing because they may tend to cite more research from their own communities. And I think that we need to think about how we're going to be able to make this bridge. What is it that's going to help to make the link? Because ultimately, if there are pockets of research that are not having the kind of exchange that they should be having, it's a waste of worldwide resources, and it's a loss for us that we're not as aware as we could be of the work that they're doing in their society. Now, Naomi and Nancy both worked hard to build those bridges in our communities, and we would like, in our continued evolution as a board and as society, as we grow and change, to continue to reach out. And now, in this last board election, as Cindy pointed out, we got 2 new members from the Asian region, and we're very happy about that and are looking forward to seeing how they will continue to grow in their leadership in the society. And I think that it's going to be extremely valuable for all of us. We'll all benefit from the fact that we have this representation. So Cindy, now that you're back, we want to hear what it is that we missed when you went offline briefly.
I'm not sure I have a whole lot more to add, but I think it is about building capacity around the world and making sure that it doesn't come down to not just representation, but also having representation be by a single person within a region. So ensuring that we have regular rotations of who is on the board and a mechanism for being able to do those small corrections, or sometimes not so small corrections, as needed is something we have not had the capacity to do. So Sadhna, does that address the issue that you raised?
Yeah, I think it does. I think there is it's a very complex issue because, as Carolyn just mentioned, there are people in these areas whose work we are not aware of. And Cindy, you mentioned a while back that, people vote for people that they know. So if people from some of these, countries, smaller countries, who are not as visible, we cannot really get the membership to vote for them because, this idea of everybody votes for, who they know. So I think it's more complex, and, having some representation on the board might help that issue, but I'm also wondering whether at the same time we need to have more efforts to increase our membership from those areas.
That's an excellent point, Sadhana. And I think that you've also raised another issue that should be addressed explicitly, and that is this bottom-up versus top-down question. I think that it can sound like this change makes the whole process a little bit more top-down, where perhaps it could seem very desirable to let things happen organically just according to some democratic process. I'd like to point out that one thing I've observed, and I think we've all discussed, those of us who have in recent years been in leadership in ISLS, is that the bottom-up dynamic tends to promote the same people over and over again. That there can be then sort of a pocket of those people who keep getting asked to do certain things because they have done them and they have done a good job, and so it's very safe. And there's a tendency in these bottom-up processes to value that safety. But what happens is it can be a little bit stifling as well, because it tends to be the case that there might be some new blood, some younger society members, people with new ideas, people with a lot of energy, that we would really benefit as a society from taking a risk every once in a while and bringing in some new blood. And so, for example, Cindy, I know, was very instrumental in the CSCL committee to instate that people couldn't, in sort of contiguous elections, be reelected, because we wanted to make it so that we sort of forced ourselves to take a little bit of a risk. And so, and that was a little bit of, going against the just let it happen organically in the most bottom-up possible way. It was a different strategy from the top, but nevertheless a strategy to sort of force ourselves against this tendency to keep going for the safety, keep going for the same people over and over. And one theme that came up in the first webinar discussion, which I think is relevant to this issue also now, is the idea that one of our goals is really to kind of open up the opportunity to include a larger number of our society in service opportunities and leadership opportunities. We want to open it up. We don't want it to be the same people over and over again, because ultimately we believe it's more healthy for the society. And so at the same time, well, this is a top-down effort, and perhaps then that just gives the people at the top more power or something. If that's a worry, I think that that's so much against the spirit of what it is that we are trying to accomplish here. Sadhana and Cindy, do you want to add either an opposing or a reaffirming a position on that issue?
Well, I think the idea of the society renewing itself is an issue that you raised, that we raised with CSCL, because I think for the first 2 or 3 elections we had the same people reelected. And in order to keep the society vibrant, it's really important that we do have people rotate through. And I will certainly say that my professional life and probably my personal life too have been greatly enriched by the colleagues that I have from all over the world, and that I get email from almost every day when I wake up. So am I getting lost again?
Yeah, I have to agree with that. I mean, honestly, you were briefly lost, and so I just took the opportunity to agree with you because I greatly value knowing that all over the world I have colleagues in the society who are close colleagues of mine.
Yeah, that I agree completely with both of you. One question, one thing I've been thinking about is, do we know how people from our members from these different areas or different disciplinary areas or regional areas feel about, the representation on the board? Is this something we would like to do as a society, to get their input about what they think about this issue?
Yeah, I've heard both sides from regions outside of North America, so in Europe and in Asia. Sometimes I have heard on the positive side that the concern is that because the natural tendency is for people to vote for people they know, that there's this perception that it's much harder if you're from an underrepresented region to to get a position in leadership. And so what ends up happening is that people get discouraged and intimidated, and that's actually a danger that could turn into a very counterproductive dynamic. And so in response to that worry, I think there has been a lot of feeling of being very supportive of this effort. But on the other side, I think that I have also heard some people feel that they don't like the idea of something that sounds like affirmative action, and the worry that that makes, there's a stigma associated with it, that there's known downsides of that, the worry that, you know, the perception is then that it's easier actually to get into a position of leadership if you're from an underrepresented region, or that somehow less would be expected of you. These things, I think, couldn't be further from the truth. However, that is a concern that I have heard with. Cindy and Sadhana have perspectives to offer on this issue.
I lost you for a moment, so
I noticed that there was a little bit of an echo. Can you hear me now?
It's a little staticky.
So maybe while it's a little bit staticky coming from my side, Sadhana, have you heard anything from these two regions? And also Cindy, I think that I know that you've had some conversations along these lines with some of our membership. Do you have a perspective to offer on this question?
My sense is I've heard more from our European colleagues than from our colleagues in Asia about concerns when there is not enough representation and when there is not enough attention to moving the society, moving the conferences to different regions. And so I've heard those complaints. I also know that there are, concerns about how easy or hard it is to get to the different meetings as well, even though we are looking to move things around a bit. So those would be the big issues that I've heard. What about you, Sadhana or Carolyn?
So since I've been running the board elections for a few years now, I think one of the things that I see is that it's very frustrating for people to be put up for elections, sometimes, two times or three times, and then not get elected, and mainly because, it's the issue of people knowing each other and people having a tendency to vote for people that they know. So in that sense, I think having some kind of a provision that actually makes this issue less prominent in board elections is something that, what we're doing is a step towards that.
One concern that I have heard raised is a perception of what might be called tokenism. Nobody wants to be the token person from a particular discipline, and I think it's really important that it not come across that way. How can we guard against that perception, and how can we also guard against it being that? I don't believe that that's where we're going, but how can we offer assurances that that's not what's happening here?
I think one challenge is trying to make sure that we reach out both in our doctoral consortium and early career events and mid-career events from around the world, as well as in the ISLS committees. So being proactive in terms of not just waiting for people to come to us, but also making sure that that the society goes to people, especially when conferences are at particular regions, because I think that's an opportunity to perhaps involve people who might not otherwise be there.
Sadhana, do you want to add anything to that?
No, not at this point.
So I'd like to point out that these efforts have been ongoing in terms of our doctoral consortium, early career workshop, and now the mid-career workshop, that I know that they're very much at the forefront of discussions about who to encourage to come and how those sessions are run, that there's been a big effort to make them international and opportunities to bring, as part of the pipeline to encourage people into leadership and service opportunities in the community. As part of that, also this year, we are organizing part of the opening session of the conference as an opportunity for all of the committees to advertise what opportunities there are, and also in a humorous way for others to get involved in order to stimulate some excitement about getting more actively involved in the society and drawing in more representation. So I'd like to point out that while I completely resonate with exactly the concerns that Cindy has been mentioning in her recent, what she was just saying, that these are things, though, that we have already been working to do. Because I have heard some people who were concerned about this bylaws change, that they saw these other kinds of efforts as an alternative. Why are you going this route instead of more outreach, more mentoring, thinking about the pipeline? But it's not an either or in our minds. I think that what we see is that we've already been trying to do these other things, and we will continue to do those things. We will not stop doing those things, and maybe we'll even do more. But we have been doing those things, but so far that has not been enough. Maybe actually a topic for this discussion will be the extent to which you've seen these efforts and how you've seen that whether you have any confidence that the problem could be solved that way. I think Cindy has already alluded to the fact that that these efforts have not had the effect that we had hoped. But I think it is a good idea to discuss this explicitly, because all three of us have been watching this and have been involved in things like our doctoral consortium, early career workshop, and mid-career workshop, and have seen how we've been trying to support the pipeline, but let's just have a little bit of discussion about that, just so that the issue has been aired for those people who are concerned about this as being an either or, and why are you taking this very top-down approach rather than this more bottom-up approach of just feeding into the pipeline.
It seems like by taking a two-pronged approach, we might meet in the middle. That I don't think it's either or, and I don't think we necessarily have to use the slots, but I think this is the option to have for a correction, and the way the bylaws are currently written, we just don't have any mechanism to do that.
I agree. I think we need to emphasize that we don't need to use these mechanisms. If it turns out that by using the other mechanisms, such as having more involvement from different regional or disciplinary areas in our committees, and in the membership committee, for example, in other workshops that we run, perhaps we'll come to a point where we don't need to use this mechanism anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I would say ideally it would be great if we didn't need to use it, but that we have it available.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I think that there's a large amount of consensus around that issue, that that the goal is that there's a tool that's available. It's optional. We don't have to use it in every election, It's up to 3 seats, but it could be 0 that we set aside. And I do believe as a board that we believe in these bottom-up efforts that we have been working to contribute towards over the years and will continue to do so. And so I think that we would use this tool sparingly. And so in the end, it may have less of an actual impact on our process than concerns might suggest. Mm-hmm. So it appears to me that we don't have among our viewers people who are actively posting issues and questions to be discussed in this webinar session. If there are no additional issues that we should be covering, we could end slightly early. So I will just ask Cindy and Sadhana, are there other issues that you think that we should discuss?
No, I don't have anything.
I think we've about covered it.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you, Carolyn, for organizing these.
Yeah.
No problem. So I would just like to say one more time, because we expect that there will be people who come to these webinars after the fact. Please recall that I have given my contact information and also pointers to other resources and places where you can voice your opinions. The goal of the next 6 months is really to get discussion going. So we encourage you to voice your opinions, to not feel in any way that we're just trying to push a particular way of moving forward. We want to have discussion. We want to know what you think. So please let us know, and especially be prepared to participate in the upcoming vote that will be this summer. And it's by no means a foregone conclusion that this vote will go through. This will be the decision of the society, and that's why there's a vote, and why we're doing it at the conference, so that we can include the majority, the largest percentage of our membership as possible in this decision. And so if the prevailing view is that this is not a good change for the society, then the vote will fail, but at least we will have had this consideration and discussion over these next 6 months, which I believe will place the leadership of the society in a much better position to know how to move forward in a way that represents the view of our society, because that's really our desire. Our desire is in this service position that we're in to engage the society and to make decisions that reflect the society's values and goals. So thank you so much for everyone who's participated. Thank you, Cindy, especially because she was also at the session that was 5 a.m. in our time zone, and so I thank her so much for being willing to be part of 2 of these, and I thank you also, Sadhana, for being available for this, and also for everything you do as our executive officer, really the backbone of our society. And many times the huge effort of the executive officer is invisible because it's done well, and it's like plumbing, you know, but where would we be without what Sadhana contributes to our society? So thank you, Sadhana. I just want to say that here.
Thank you.
And thank you both, and have a good evening.
Good night.
Good night.